I am Dewey Evans. I'm the performance architect with Evans Kurth Holdings and Communiplasticity Solutions. Why do I call myself the performance architect? Well, because I architect solutions. I don't just let things happen. I create structures, scaffolding around things, and to get to where it is that we want to get to at the absolute peak of performance. Today, I'm going to talk about why you should have your child go deep instead of just going wide. And I think it's something that I can talk about for 20 minutes. I'm going to be looking down at the chat to see if anybody comes in with any questions because the goal of this is to have it be interactive. So if anybody's on here, please say hi. It is early. I know it is 5:30 in the morning Central Time. It is 6:30 in the East. And so maybe somebody on the East is up and with me, though I didn't advertise that this was happening. I talked about last week's, but so we'll see if anybody comes on. So going deep versus going wide. I think when we start out with our kids, we're always going wide. And what I mean by that is we're trying to figure out where their place is in the world. We try lots of things on. Um, I think we're always looking for, well, what fits best? What is that uniform? And so sometimes it might be arts, and other times it might be sports, and sometimes it's just academic pursuit. So, speech and debate. But we got to figure out what that is. So we start out going wide. We put our kids in a variety of activities. We probably try on music at some point in time. I know my parents did. I learned the piano, and I wouldn't say I learned the piano. I took piano lessons. And then when I got to middle school, I played the trombone and stayed with that for a while. I actually took it to overnight camp with me, and I would be the one playing taps at the end of the day when they were lowering the flag. Um, but music wasn't my thing. And so, tried on sports. I played sports from a very early age. Obviously, if you know anything about me now, you know that sports is kind of what stuck. But even within those categories, what is the thing which is going to specifically be? So once we narrow it down, um, what is the thing going to be? So I went real wide in sports. I think I did every sport, almost every sport imaginable at the competitive level. Unfortunately, in sixth grade, we didn't have football, and I didn't fit the height and weight requirements for Pop Warner. So I didn't get to play football until seventh grade. So I played soccer in sixth grade. But before that, it was baseball, and it was youth hockey. And we had a partial share in a ski house in Vermont. And so, tried on skiing, whether that be freestyle or ski racing. What else did I try on? Certainly basketball, right? So everybody had a basketball hoop in the neighborhood and tried basketball, and I tried some park and rec basketball type things, and so I tried that on. Early on, baseball was my thing. Um, it was probably my first introduction to sport. Also, I had a neighbor, Brick McWilliams, who was also the building inspector in town. He happened to have a left-handed mitt, and he would go out with me in the evenings and play catch in the road for hours on end, and it was the thing that I loved. I went and I had transistor radio over my handlebars on one side and my glove on the handlebars on the other side, and I had baseball cards in my spokes, and the radio was to listen to Red Sox games. I'm a Bostonian, that area, Concord and Lexington. Um, and so that was my first one. Everybody thought, well, this kid's going to be a professional baseball player. At least that was the thought when I was 10 years old. And then we got into high school or middle school in seventh grade, and I got to play football, and football became a thing. Well, at some point in time, tennis crept in. I don't know when it was that tennis crept in, but it became part of my routine. And so, eventually I kind of went down that road and played tennis a lot, um, but gave it up for football when I got to college. But that's neither here nor there. That's we're talking about going deep versus going wide. I went very wide in sports, and then kind of went deep in a couple. What does going deep look like? Going deep is that moment where something kind of changes and you recognize, ah, this is my kids' thing. They're just different. I don't have to ask them to get ready to go to practice. They're excited about games. They talk about it. In my case, I slept with and I got a new glove. I put a baseball in it and I wrapped it up and I put it under my pillow. I slept with it. It was my thing. Can't say as I ever slept with my bat, but I certainly slept with my glove. And so you recognize, oh, this is the thing. And so now you have a choice, and not everybody makes this choice. Some people insist on the things that they want for their kid. And so they continue to push, something academic, something musically, something, and that's okay for a while. Um, I'm not going to say your family should do one thing versus another thing. I'm going to advocate for what I believe. And so this isn't what you should do. This is what I would do. Um, so I was someone who just didn't want the other things. Um, and so with my kids, I chose to figure out where to go deep. But I also made a mistake. I felt like going deep meant going after one thing because as the performance architect, I believed that the only way that you learned the ancillary skills of discipline and task prioritization and time management and all of those things that I believe transfer into life was by finding one thing and figuring out how to try to be the absolute best at it. I've thought about that over the past year, and I think I made a mistake as a parent because I don't think that that's necessarily the case. There are a lot of super successful people my age who their goal was to be make the team for 3 seasons of sports at their high school. So they worked really hard to be a good enough football player and a good enough basketball player or indoor track person or wrestler or whatever the winter sports were. And then figuring out in the spring, how are they good enough at whatever the spring sports might be. So whether it be baseball or lacrosse or tennis or soccer, wherever soccer fits in spring or fall. Um, how to be good enough at each one of those so that they could make the high school team. And if they had some reasonable aptitude towards sports, how could they become the captain of their high school team in each of those sports? And so I think that that's actually going deep and lessons that you learn of how do you balance the pursuit of excellence at multiple things. And the reason I came to this conclusion was I was like, duh, in everything that I do, I'm talking about doing it in multiple realms, anyways, because I advocate it's always something plus academics that you don't ever give up your education. So I'm already at the place of it's figuring out how to be good at something and something else. Now the question is just how many things can you dig in to try to be excellent at? So I think it's okay to have multiple things that you're going deep on. And that becomes where the learning actually happens. Of this isn't just a single trick pony. This is something where we're trying to figure out the demands of different things. And maybe they're not so dissimilar if they're multiple sports, while we're still trying to figure out all of the speed, strength, and agility components, and they all feed in to each other, particularly when we're talking about open skill sports. The more open skills you can develop, the better off you are. If we're talking about more about a closed skill sport, something like a swimming or a figure skating, then it might be a little bit harder, and the transfer between being an Olympic breaststroker or trying to be an Olympic breaststroker and also having a goal of making the US national team in soccer, you're working on different things all the time. Um, so, how do you go deep into both of those things? There would be a real challenge. I'm not sure it's one that I would take on personally, but I certainly think it is one worthy of anyone who wants to try to do so. Um, so that's kind of what going deep is. How do we take and eliminate distractions, identify where it is that we're trying to go, and chase it? But I believe the process of chasing going deep is the place where we have skills developed which transfer, excuse me, across a lifetime. Um, when we run into hurdles, how do we get past those hurdles? How do we not just settle? And I guess I can't say it in strong enough terms how much I believe in this versus simply going wide, giving your kid a chance to just do everything and never dial in and never focus and or even just focus. And maybe here's the crux of it. I think just focusing on academics doesn't do it, right? So there is a place left specifically within the student body of places like Duke and Stanford and Harvard for athletes. Because if all they did was admit the people with the best test scores and the best grades, um, they'd have a struggle with the student body. And this is the struggle, is that those people have never experienced failure. There are plenty of people who have never got a B in their life, who have almost perfect test scores, who have been at the absolute top of their class. They're valedictorians, the salutatorians, the um, people that were captains of the academic debate team, all of those things. What you get when you get athletes is you get something into the student body which has a bit of grit, some resilience, some all of the mental toughness things that I talk about. And if you follow my writing, then you know I talk about that a lot. But you have people that are used to losing championship games and how do you bounce back, or losing a tough match 7-6 in the third, and how do you bounce back for the back draw or the next tournament or whatever it is. Those people are vital within a community, having people who understand what it takes to bounce back after having had some level of failure. That's something that sports teach. I think anything that includes competition teaches that. I suspect, though I've never been a competitive chess player, I suspect if you were in that realm, it also teaches it because you can't win every competition. Any competition that has a winner means it has a bunch of people who didn't win. And maybe, instead of thinking about that serve that I hit at 5-4, 40-30, it's and I got it roped back at me. um, I'm thinking about some move that I made in a chess match where I could have done this or I could have done that, or should I have used a different opening? Or I don't know enough about chess to really talk about chess, but maybe that's where it is. Or you recognize you were in an orchestra competition and somehow you blew some note at some key moment. You were off by half a beat or something like that, and it caused the score for the entire orchestra to go down. Those are the types of experiences which give you nightmares, causes you to reflect, and causes growth if done correctly, right? So we have this whole thing in mental performance of, how long Do we stay in our peak performance state before something happens and we crack? And then once we crack, how bad do we crack? Do we just not able to play whatever our instrument is for the rest of it and we're off the whole time? Um, do we go really, really, really deep into that hole where like I can't even take it? I got to walk off the stage. Um, Versus I don't go so deep and I keep muddling along. And then how long does it take before you come back to where you were? And so I came, I found it. I was watching the Olympics yesterday, I guess, and saw this guy, Ilya, and so he's a figure skater. I don't remember what Ilya's last name is, but they call him the Quad God. And I was watching this performance, and he did a quad something. I don't know the difference between a quad toe loop and whatever the other jumps are, but he did one, and he kind of fell, or what to me looked like he fell out of it, but he kept going. And then he figured out how to put that same jump in later, and it was a free skate performance, and managed to put it back in. So his resilience, so he didn't, when he broke, he didn't, he almost didn't break. But if he did, he very quickly, he was very resilient and he came back to it. The question, the last component, was he better for it or worse for it? Who knows? But he had a moment on an Olympic stage that he recovered from, and they still won the gold medal, which is absolutely amazing. Those types of things, would be things that you dwell on forever. I remember Eric Heiden. You might remember him. He was an Olympic speed skater, and after preparing, he fell. And what happens there? So you've been preparing all of this life, all your life, for a 1 minute, 3 minute, whatever it happens to be, skate, and you break at that point in time. Does it cause you irreparable harm? So once you kind of do get it back together, however long that takes, do you get it back together? Um, and you're better for it. And Eric Heiden's case, he became a physician, and so he has recovered from it well. And I don't know him at all, so I'm only speaking to what I know from media reports. Um, but those are the types of things that you learn when you go deep. You don't learn it when you're going wide. You don't have those moments. There's nothing so significant that you dwell on it, that you lose sleep on it, that it comes back to you in a nightmare decades later. You've got to create those moments for your kids, and you've got to help them, not push them. I'm not advocating pushing your child into something. I'm advocating, once you find that moment where things are, this is just, there's something different about my kid and this. For one of the students that I had at tennis, it was the they had to clear all the furniture out of their dining room and tack up one of those little mini nets to the wall. And he would play games against himself against the wall and would keep track of it, had a notebook that he was actually playing games day after day after day. This was 8 years old, 9 years old. Well, he went on and he did pretty well. He played collegiate tennis at Pepperdine. Those things showed early. They dug into it. They gave him opportunities. They gave him opportunities to compete. Found me that, he comes to mind because the coldest tennis lesson I ever taught was the very first one I had with him at the YMCA in Plano. I've never been so cold in my life, but they were giving their 9-year-old a chance to work with what they believed would be one of the best people that they could find, to give him a chance to go deep. Um, so those things are important. At least I believe they are. If you're someone who believes that just going wide is good enough, well, you're probably not listening to this. You probably tuned out as soon as I started talking about going deep versus going wide. So if you're listening, you believe what I believe. right? Um, that's about my 20 minutes for the day. Had to ramble a little bit. If you are interested in performance architecture, I blog at theperformancearchitect.com/blog. I pretty much write something daily. Sometimes I'm writing multiple things a day. They are all about the performance world. And next week, I'm going to talk about the skills that actually transfer and why it's important to get those in first. Why do it as a kid? So, till then, this has been marvelous. I'm enjoying it. This is my second week back. I'm just getting back into form. I'm trying to figure out, okay, should I add little charts and graphs and things like that? I certainly have the capacity to do that. But for the moment, I just wanted to get used to talking to you, um, and being comfortable with that. Not so comfortable at the moment, but I think that it's important to do some things sometimes that you're not absolutely comfortable with so that you as an adult recognize what it feels like for your child to come out of their comfort zone and into their learning zone. So, till next week, toodles.